Senior Fellow at the Menzies Research Centre, columnist with the Australian Nick Cater, and Sky News contributor Jamie Rogers. Well, I want to start, if I can, Nick Cater, with Jacinta Nampijinpa Price being dumped just now, as we've heard from Susan Lee. And I guess I'll start with the revisionism that's happening already about what Jacinta Price said. Immigration's too high, statement of fact. Indian migrants are a large cohort in terms of that increase. It's a fact. They've doubled, in fact, in the last 10 years. Incorrect was her comments to say Labor are only bringing in this cohort, this Indian migrant cohort, because they vote for Labor. Well, that part's wrong, except, I suppose, those comments from Kos Samaras, who says at the last election 85% of them voted Labor. Now, there's a range of reasons for that, and I think the Libs do not do enough. They are absolutely, on paper, Liberal sort of aspirational, small business, pro-family voters. But this is quickly becoming something, I think, where Jacinta Price is being held to account in the public domain for a sense that she may have vilified Indian migrants. But that's not what she said, and that's not the facts.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Peter. We have to be clear about that. I mean, the fact is, the facts as she spoke them were correct. 40% of migrants last year, roughly, came from the Indian subcontinent. But, I mean, I've got no problem with that, particularly. The problem that we have as Liberals and the problem the country has is there are too many migrants, full stop. The Day One story should have been about the advisability of Jacinta Price going into that particular territory and naming one particular cohort. But the Day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 story is all about Susan Lee's leadership, I'm afraid to say. And we know where that's come to today.
Jamie, you know, we saw this with the work from home issue in the election campaign. I know you were a candidate in that campaign. And as justifiable as it should be to have a debate in this country about getting workers back into the office for all the reasons we've talked about, that was then walked away rapidly from the coalition because they got caught up, even though they were talking about public servants, they get caught up in a generalised debate about the private sector workforce, and they couldn't deal with the nuance in the campaign, so they dropped it and ran a mile. What's the fear here that after this fracas, the Liberal Party will drop any discussion about immigration when we know, you know, my viewers know it's one of the big issues that Australians want to debate about?
You're absolutely spot on there, Peter. That was one of my first thoughts when all of this was unravelling throughout the week, was that the Liberals would be running away from any form of a discussion or a debate regarding this mass immigration, which is what Jacinta Nampijinpa Price was trying to get across. And as she said, her message was a bit clumsy on the ABC. But we have to make sure that the Liberals get back together now. I've got to say, Peter, it's been quite distressing to see that the Liberals were back in the news for the wrong reasons, where they're doing infighting against each other instead of actually going and holding Labor to account. We need a strong opposition government because this government is woeful, and if they're not strong in the opposition, they're not going to be calling out the issues. Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers will be loving watching what's been unfolding with the Liberal Party in this past week. So I'm with you. I really hope that this now doesn't scare off the Liberals and that they don't now talk about mass immigration, because it is a huge concern and it comes up all the time across all different communities. People are genuinely concerned that our infrastructure and our way of life is at risk here with the amount of people coming into the country.
And I have to say, Nick, you know, I've worked for 3 Liberal leaders. If you're in the top job, if you're in the big seat, if you've got the job of leader of the Liberal Party, you've got to have the backbone, the courage, indeed, if you think your colleague's out of line, is to pick up the bloody phone and call your colleague quickly as you possibly can and resolve the issue. And ordinarily, if you are the leader, it's your colleague who backs down, and if you want them to apologise or do whatever in terms of reframing some remarks, you deal with that swiftly and you move on. I think part of the reason there's been a bleed here, as at no time has Susan Lee publicly said she wants an apology. I know that she did not speak to Price until Monday, so that's 4 or 5 days with no speaks, which I find extraordinary. But perhaps worse of all, and this is a problem inside the Liberal Party, the bother boy goes out, the bother boy rings the colleague, and the bother boy or someone on their behalf briefs the media. This is the big problem the Liberal Party's got to contend with?
Yeah, look, I don't know if she sent out an attack dog on this. I mean, that sort of stuff. But you're dead right. It is the leader's job to deal with this and deal with it swiftly. But I think Susan Lee's real difficulty on this, Peter, is something you hinted at earlier in the programme, that she should have been able to say to Jacinta Price, you have departed from the party's position, therefore you've got to correct what you said. But she doesn't actually have a position to correct her on. There is no party policy as regards immigration right now because everything is up in the air for the next 9 months or so. That is impossible to run a decent opposition on that basis. We need a position on immigration. I see the line as very clear. It needs to be carefully worded, carefully thought through because it's a very sensitive area.